This is OFN NFL Preview on the Ourlads Football Network as we preview the NFC North. And we do that, of course, with Mark Lawrence from Playbook.com. So, Mark, another week, which means we are another week closer to the NFL season starting. Pandemic, of course, is going to allow us or not to continue this steady progress. But fact is, we have now been alerted there will be no preseason games. And I don't think anybody really cares about that. But training camp also starts in a week.
That's all good news, if you will, Greg. Just the fact that the NFL looks closer and closer to getting ready to play. If they're modeling after the NBA, good news for them because the NBA has done a wonderful job getting their game back in the court. And if the NFL can follow anything like they're doing as far as protocols go, it'll be good news for everybody.
Yeah, so far so good. NHL, we haven't heard anything crazy coming out of there. Even baseball, we haven't heard any, even though things were really bad a few weeks ago for quite a long time. Things have been pretty good for the last week. I haven't really heard anything negative in baseball, and that starts tomorrow.
Yeah, it seems what the gamut seems to be is basically when these players do come in to begin training, they're coming in with viruses. They're being picked up and reported. And the reports are not good. But after they've been there a while, acclimated themselves, done the tests, the numbers begin to decrease, which is really, really good. And if the National Football League can follow that model and put a real good protocol plan in place, I think it'll be very promising.
Yeah, because we still don't know, of course, about the fan situation. The governor of New Jersey just came out this week and said no fans, but basically he was saying no fans as of now. So that's, look, we still have, 6 weeks to go, I guess? Maybe, about 6 weeks to go before the season begins. 7 weeks? Maybe even, about 7 weeks. That's a lot of time for there to be, look, I don't think there could be much worse news. Of course, you could always say they could delay the season. I don't see that happening. I think the only way that they delay the NFL season is you would have to have a rash of deaths spike in this country. I'm not thinking that's going to happen. So the question is going to be will they eventually allow a certain number of fans into the stadiums? And if so, when will that happen? Because I think once the process starts, I'd feel pretty confident that each week, maybe a little bit more of a percentage of fans and so forth and so on. These are just two big stadiums to have no fans. It just doesn't make any sense why you can't have a few thousand fans in a stadium that holds 50 to 70,000 people.
I get that completely, and I know the NFL owners are talking about at least wanting to be granted the opportunity to put maybe 25,000 fans in the stands.
Yeah.
And seated social distance wise.
Yes.
Which is good. But let me ask you this: if I called you up and said, "Hey, Greg, you want to go to the Carolina football game this weekend? I'll pick you up and we'll go." And we had to sit 6 seats apart. Would that be an ideal setting?
You mean as far as having fun?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Well, look, if they're telling you to see, I would hope that it would be they're going to sell the seats and tell the people that are, all right, if you have 2 seats, 4 seats, or 6, you can sit together. It's everybody else, though, that sits apart. If they got to tell the people who bought 4 tickets that you have to sit 6 seats, against each other, that also doesn't make any sense. I mean, you're supposed to be coming with people that you know. You're going to be driving to the game with them more than likely. So come on. I mean, I would hope they wouldn't be that asinine.
Well, I think there's also going to be testing in play here as well for the fans to let them into the stadium. So
yeah, sure.
They're going to want to make sure that they've been tested. Exactly right.
I agree with that too. Yes, test the fans when they come in. Do whatever you have to do. And they got all the money in the world. So why not? All right. Here, we have a good look at Mark's Playbook magazine, available on newsstands now. Also, you can go to playbook.com, check it out. Mark, where is this available? Newsstands?
We're at Barnes & Nobles and Books A Millions and other independent newsstands all across the country. Anybody listening in Las Vegas, which is our #1 selling city, we're also in stock at the Gamblers Book Club in Las Vegas. If you can't get to any of those bookstores, you can also pick up copies by logging onto the website at playbook.com.
And don't forget, you can order the Arled's Guide to the NFL Draft and Free Agency 2020 Review Guide. That's available, and the Draft Guide. I mean, if you don't have the Draft Guide and you don't have the Review Guide, we'll get them both. Okay, so let's get started. We have the NFC North to talk about, and we have a even situation as far as the odds are concerned with the Packers in Minnesota in the division. But as far as the championship of the Super Bowl, the edge goes to the Packers. Packers, Minnesota are somewhere around even to 2-1 to win the division, but the Packers are 12-1 to win the NFC. Minnesota's 15-1 to win the NFC. Packers 24 to win the Super Bowl. Minnesota 30 to win the Super Bowl. And with odds like that, I'm sure they are a little bit different at every sports book you go to. But the Packers, at least in the sports book I use, are the slight favorites overall. And again, I even think you probably see that a little bit different at every sports book. The Packers didn't make a lot of changes as far as free agency this year, Mark. Matter of fact, I guess the biggest news that came out of camp came out of the team this offseason was the whole deal with Jordan Love being taken, of course, at quarterback. And what exactly does that do in the immediate future with Aaron Rodgers? Is that going to affect his play at all? And how much time does Aaron Rodgers have in Green Bay?
I think a lot of that will go toward how productive Jordan Love looks in camp. If they find out that he is indeed what they thought he was, and Aaron Rodgers can see the writing on the wall, we could be talking about former Green Bay Packer quarterback Aaron Rodgers, because I know he's not going to settle for that. He was also in the same situation, as you remember, behind Brett Favre, and he knew what he was coming into. And Jordan Love should probably know what he's coming into here as well. So, the bottom line here is, I think Aaron Rodgers is a team player, and he will be the reason that this football team likely wins the division. And he's also the reason, as you mentioned, Greg, about the odds within the division. He's the reason that they gain the edge over Minnesota, is because Green Bay has Aaron Rodgers as their quarterback, as opposed to Kirk Cousins from Minnesota.
Yeah, and look, I think this is, if you look at it, Rodgers sat, 3 years, I believe?
Yes, he
with
did.
Favre. I think this. I wouldn't be surprised if this happened again. I mean, because Love is so he has so much work that needs to be done mechanically. The kid, if he was, let's just put it this way, if something happened where he was forced to play right away, it would be ugly. I mean, that kid is guy. I mean, he and it was funny because he actually would make Brett Favre looked like he was a reliable quarterback when he was a rookie. That's what Love would look like, because, I mean, we just saw what happened to him when he had a coaching change in his last year at Utah State. And that coaching change and a little bit of talent, of course, left. But the coaching change killed Jordan Love. And you could just tell that they weren't really even coaching his mechanics. So he has a ways to go. Sort of like Rodgers. Remember when Rodgers came out, he had that really terrible throwing motion. It took him a lot of time to figure out how to throw the ball properly, the mechanics and so forth. But Love he needs even more work. So I wouldn't be surprised if Rodgers was the starting quarterback for at least 2 more years.
Well, I think if something were to happen, if you will, in that sense, to Aaron Rodgers, I don't believe Jordan Love would start regardless. They would go to, I think it was Tim Boyle, the backup quarterback. He did a pretty nice job, at least, coming off the bench.
Sure.
And he knows the Packer playbook.
I agree.
So, you still wouldn't see Jordan Love. I think Jordan Love, like you said, is a project, and a project that could be a 2 or 3 year term project as well. He struggled at Utah. People were wondering whether or not he would be a first round pick. Most were surprised that he was. I think he was a first-round pick based largely upon his stature, the fact that he looks like a National Football League quarterback, but he's still got a lot of learning to do. And I think the bottom line, by the time the season's over, it'll be all Aaron Rodgers talk coming out of Green Bay.
That's why I love doing the college football shows too, because we could talk about, talking about Jordan Love after the terrific year he had previous. It was like, oh, hey, don't watch out. Here's a kid that maybe he can get into the second round. He'd be a nice sleeper. And then all of a sudden, last year comes. He plays awful. and he somehow finds a way to get into the first round anyway. And then people find out, just like what we had known all along, that he's a talented player. But you don't look at Jordan Love's film from 2019. You have to look at his film from 2018.
Unquestionably, that was his better year for sure. I think what mystified everybody, aside from the fact that they did select Jordan Love with that first round pick, they actually didn't compliment anybody in the draft to help Aaron Rodgers come along that way this football season here.
Except so that was Devin Funchess.
Well, true, but I'm talking about what happened in the draft this year.
Nothing.
Yeah, nothing. I mean,
except a tight end. That's it. It's a couple of tight ends. That's all. In free agency and the draft, in free agency, in the draft, basically they're going to be relying on last year's third rounder Sternberger and then this year's third rounder DeGuara. That's it. That's all they got. And A.J. Dillon at running back.
Also, with their second pick, but if you take a look at their first 6 picks, they were all offensive players. They didn't even concentrate on the defense, did the Green Bay Packers?
Nope.
Which is a little bit surprising to me as well. So, they're going to put it all on Aaron Rodgers, but, when push came to shove, they were desperately in need of wide receivers, and there wasn't one wide receiver to be found on the Green Bay Packer draft board.
And it was such a great draft for receivers. It just didn't make any sense.
It was head-scratching.
Yep.
Right.
So they're going to be relying on, again, a Devin Funchess, who you can't rely on.
No.
You're going to hope that St. Brown and Valdez Scantling maybe take another step, or Alan Lazard, but that's it. All you got. And even A.J. Dillon, that pick was a little bit strange, because I'm not even sure A.J. Dillon was a second-round draft pick. And he was taken over several other running backs that looked like they had a little bit more talent. So that was even a head-scratcher, because you have Jamal Williams as a fine number 2 running back. Aaron Jones proves he's a number 1. What the heck you need A.J. Dillon for in the second round?
And Dillon's got weight issues. He's got injury issues. And he's got incentive issues. So, whether or not he materializes, he put some big numbers up with Boston College earlier in his career, but he doesn't figure to help this Green Bay Packer team, at least initially this football season. And as you say, this was a draft that was absolutely loaded with wide receivers, which was Green Bay's biggest need. When Jordan Love came along in the first round of the draft, everybody was wondering which wide receiver they would be choosing, and it ended up being nobody throughout the whole draft. So it was, I think, the ugliest draft of all the teams in the NFL this year.
And you see Ricky Wagner, the right tackle free agent from Detroit, will replace Brian Bulaga. And basically Christian Kirksey, the linebacker from Cleveland, replaces Blake Martinez, who went to the Giants. And I think the tackle situation might be an improvement. Linebacker situation is definitely not an improvement. And you also lost Fackrell to the Giants. What the Packers really need on defense is for Rashawn Gary to step up. They really need him to blossom in year 2. And talking to some of the people in Green Bay, they have, and I'm not talking about the team, I'm talking about people, analysts, writers, and so forth. There's a hope there that Rashawn Gary will definitely be a breakout player to keep an eye on this year.
Well, I don't want to beat a dead horse to death here, but what was also mystifying when they traded up to get Jordan Love,
yes,
is the fact that they had just signed Aaron Rodgers to a monstrous 4-year extension.
Yeah.
Nobody.
Same front office too.
Exactly. Nobody saw this coming. Nobody saw it coming, and everybody yet today is still mystified.
All right. So again, the question then becomes: do you feel confident, considering that the Packers they were a playoff team, a second-round playoff team? Didn't look very good. The game was pretty much over early second half against the Niners on the road. It is the second year with the coaching staff, so that's a plus, especially with the pandemic this year. 12-1 championship, 24-1 Super Bowl. I think the Super Bowl is probably asking for a little bit too much, but then again, Aaron Rodgers, you get him in big game, you never know what's going to happen. 12-1 is not bad. I think it's better than last week when we talked about the Cowboys at 8-1.
Yeah, there's some value here, because whenever you're talking Aaron Rodgers, there's always the likely possibility of making the playoffs, and you never know then what will happen in a situation like that. I'm a little bit concerned about this offense here this year, Greg. They surprisingly, I don't think people realize this, They won 14 games last year, 13 during the regular season. And they have a win total this year of 4 games fewer than the 13 games they won during the regular season last year. So obviously everybody's seeing right through that with the Green Bay Packers here. They had a 9-win season total at the Westgate when these opening numbers came up here. And I mentioned the offense here. If you take a look at the Packers football team, their last 6 games of the year, they didn't crack 30 points. And in fact, their last 10 games, they scored only 31 points one time. So, this offense struggled last football season here, and I just don't know what the remedy is going to be this year because I don't see anybody supporting Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, they must have a lot of confidence in, well, it's year 2 of our system. That's it, because they sure didn't add a lot of players to that offense because that's all they got working for them. Well, we'll see. Maybe they got the last laugh. But again, like I said, I do prefer the Packers at 12-1 than the Cowboys, which I think they were 8-1. Because I think the Cowboys should have been more like 12-1. So I like the numbers better with the Packers. But do I like them better than Minnesota? Vikings are 15-1, as we mentioned, and 30-1 to win the Super Bowl. They had the big playoff win, knocking out the Saints. And, that was an interesting situation because, first of all, you had, what's his name? Who was it that pushed off there in that game-winning touchdown? Was that Kyle Rudolph?
Was this? Okay, yeah, Kyle Rudolph.
He was the one that pushed off? Okay.
Yeah.
So,
right.
And look, you get away with it, you get away with it. And then the Vikings beat the Saints, and the Saints lose again in the playoffs. And they felt, I'm sure, was a bad call. But fact is, that was a huge emotional win. The locker room for the team, because Kirk Cousins finally got his one win. We talked about it at the time. I just thought that was kind of silly to go crazy about a guy that had finally won a playoff game. Hey, you won one game. Congratulations. What do you want? You want a medal? And then the next week, they get pretty much blitzed. So it was all over after 1 week. But, maybe a win in a big game situation, that'll help them as the future. We don't know how long the future is going to be in Minnesota, but right now, it's still Kirk Cousins' team. You do like the fact that, unlike the Packers, they went after a wide receiver and Justin Jefferson. Matter of fact, 15 draft picks were added by Minnesota in the draft. So there's a lot of young players that are going to be counted on to help out this team. And, they lost a few free agents, but they added a few. I think overall it's a good offseason when you keep a lot of your key players. I know Diggs is gone, but, you replace him with Jefferson. You have a lot of key players coming back, and then you add 15 young rookies.
Yep, and you've also got the money machine, Mike Zimmer, their head coach, who's done a great job not only cashing tickets, but also I think what goes unnoticed is the great job defensively that Minnesota does. If you look at them their last 4 football seasons, I believe if you add up their average yards they allow, it's just slightly over 300 yards a game, which is the reason that they're always either a playoff team or over at 500 or over. So they're always going to be competitive as long as Mike Zimmer is on the sideline. And the question is whether or not Kirk Cousins can keep them in games and not lose football games. They started off real well last year. When I say started off real well, they had 2 losses to begin the football season. They started out 6-2, and they won the yards in 6 of those 8 football games as well. So they were playing some really, really good football. Then they took on Kansas City and lost a heartbreaker. I mean, they were in a football game that they lost by 3 points in the contest. And then the wheels started to come off a little bit for Minnesota in the end. So I like this football team. I like the coach. And I think they did a fantastic job with those draft picks. It wasn't just 15 draft picks. It was quality draft picks that they did. I think they did a terrific job analyzing the draft. So if that can help this football team this year, they're going to indeed go toe-to-toe with the Green Bay Packers.
Yeah, the big splash on offense was Jefferson. And again, it was needed when you traded Diggs. But most of the talent comes on defense. And the secondary is going to look almost brand new because Waynes is gone, Alexander's gone, Rhodes is gone. But then you drafted Gladney, Dantzler, and Harrison Hand at corner. You brought in a couple of safeties. As far as the defensive front, you signed Michael Pierce. And then you drafted a bunch of young, talented players. DJ Wonnum, James Lynch, Troy Dye, Kenny Willekes. To help the front seven. So, yeah, and like you said, with Mike Zimmer, he gets an opportunity to work with all that young talent. There's not many other coaches in the league that can get the best out of him. Now, it takes some time for rookies under Zimmer to work in and for him to feel confident. But fact is, they're going to rely on rookies this year. They have to. It's just the way that the team is. But Justin Jefferson, he's going to be the one guy that is going to be probably most crucial, because if anything were to happen again to Adam Thielen, who had some injury issues last year, if anything happens to him, it's all on Justin Jefferson, because you can't count on any of the other receivers they have there. And I'm not even sure, Tajay Sharp is an interesting pickup. Maybe a change of scenery will boost his career. But boy, Justin Jefferson is going to be a big time. He might be the biggest addition for them offensively this offseason.
He will be. And my concern there is putting all their hopes on a rookie like that without their offensive coordinator, Kevin Stefanski, who left to go to the Cleveland Browns. Yep. That's a big hole they have to fill here, a different playbook coming in there that way. And they're also going to have to keep Dalvin Cook healthy as well. He had a great football season last year when he showed he can play when he's healthy. The question is he durable enough to have back-to-back healthy seasons?
All right, so again, 15 and 30-1 for the Vikings. It's tough with the Vikings, with Kirk Cousins, to think Super Bowl. It just is. So, but the odds are good, and they're a talented team, and they're well coached. So, I think they're a team you definitely have to consider at those numbers.
I think you do too. Always, like I say, because Mike Zimmer plays to win games. We saw that even in preseason games, if you will, Greg. I mean, he went for the throat in the preseason as well. So anytime the whistle blows, he's out to win games. He's out for your throat. So the bottom line is you're going to have to be prepared to take on a Mike Zimmer football team. Kirk Cousins, a big question mark in the equation here. Probably the most vastly overpaid quarterback, arguably, in the National Football League. He has skills, but he hasn't delivered. He hasn't played. His numbers haven't reached his contract, if you will. So if he can do that, if he can be a force for this football team, they could either equal or surpass the Green Bay Packers.
Okay, now let's talk about the other two teams in the division. And all of a sudden, in 1 year, the Bears went from this favorite, hey, we're the hot new team. We got the new hot coach. We've got the young quarterback that is he's got to get better, right? Well, no. Mitch Trubisky got worse. And Mitch Trubisky actually looked like the quarterback, and still has always looked like the quarterback that I thought he was going to be. I never understood what the Bears were thinking trading up for Mitch Trubisky. I just never understood it. I didn't know what they were looking at with his college film. I remember watching his final bowl game and knowing where that he could be a first-round pick, and I was looking at that game. I think it was the Sun Bowl against Stanford, maybe. And I was going, what the? This guy's a first-round draft. There's no way this guy's a first-round draft pick, the way he was playing. And then not only that, but he gets picked as high as he did, almost the first pick of the draft. And even with a guru at coaching him up, but with their new coach, it didn't help. I think Nick Foles is going to more than likely end up as the starter. Look, there's no preseason, though. That's the interesting thing, is that how does that work out? Does that mean with no preseason that Trubisky gets the job at least in week 1?
I think it's in Nagy's mind that if he wants Nick Foles to be the quarterback, he's going to have to change his playbook around Nick Foles' style of quarterbacking. If he wants Mitchell Trubisky to be that particular quarterback, he's going to have to make changes because Mitchell Trubisky hasn't shown anything. Remember, he was only a freshman when he was drafted out of North Carolina, and he would have been a senior last year. So he still has room for improvement maturity-wise, and he did show some physical skills at North Carolina, but it was a reach. And like you say, I think the thing that was befuddling is the fact that they did trade up to get him, as opposed to letting him come to them. And I think we've often talked about the key to success in the National Football League drafts is letting players come to you, which is exactly what Minnesota did last year. Minnesota they had probably the golden draft of drafts because every player that came to them filled a need, and it was a player that somebody else just above them wanted and took a need of, and they didn't lose. So that's how you play the draft. Is Minnesota played it really well, and other teams don't learn that. And I think that'll end up paying off for the Vikings here. As far as the Bears are concerned, I think they're a struggling football team, and if you have to depend on Nick Foles to get you there, you could be in trouble.
Yeah, either way, the team needs help from the rest of. I mean, the quarterbacks need help from the rest of the team. Bears 4-1 to win the division, 20-40 for the championship in the Super Bowl. The only thing I could see, best case scenario, is that Nick Foles, at some point, and maybe they hang around 500 with or without Foles, and then he just gets hot by the end of the season. Maybe the schedule works in their favor. He gets hot. We've seen him get hot before, and that's it. That's the only thing I could see for the Bears. They're not a team to put any money on. That's the case. As far as their additions defensively, they did add Robert Quinn. They gave him $70 million. They drafted Jalen Johnson in the second round to play corner. I don't know, Artie Burns from Pittsburgh. I don't know what kind of free agent pickup that's going to be. Offensively, they also added Jimmy Graham. Their top pick was the Notre Dame tight end. It's a good football team that needs their quarterback like most other NFL teams. This is the difference a bit. This is what separates the playoff teams from the non-playoff teams. There's a lot of teams with the talent, like the Chicago Bears out there. The difference is, do they have the quarterback to get them over the top?
Well, I don't think Chicago does, and I think the fans realize that as well. What really handcuffed Chicago was the fact that they did not have a first-round draft pick last year to build on, if you will. And do this, Greg. Go up and down their schedule, and you look and see their last 9 games of the season that they're going to play are against teams that were in the playoffs last year.
Oh, that's it?
So,
okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, they're going to have to get their wins and make their hay early on in the football season and build some confidence, because they're going to end up having to go up really against a brick wall to end the football season here. And if they don't build that confidence, it could be one miserable season, and it could also then ultimately end up being the last year of Matt Nagy in Chicago.
And of course, what really hurt them was the situation on defense. They had a monster defense that helped Trubisky and the rest of the team in 2018. They lose their defensive coordinator, and Pagano's a good coordinator, but he's not on that level, and he's not a star coordinator. And you could just tell that they weren't the same defensive team. But the talent's there. You're paying Khalil Mack more money than any other defender in football. So, he's got to produce. Like I said, you brought in Quinn. Eddie Jackson, of course, is off to a nice start in his career. But there's some other issues and questions in the secondary, and offensively, there's just not a lot. I mean, Anthony Miller, he hasn't stepped up yet. He was a second-round draft pick. Montgomery, the third-round pick last year, he didn't look all that great. He was okay, but not special for a third-round running back. So, yeah, there's work to be done in Chicago, and I just don't think they're a team you want to put any money down on.
No, I don't either. And in fact, if you throw out 2018, 2 years ago, when they won 12 games, this football team has been really wallowing below the 500 mark. And I don't see room for any reason for improvement from this football program here this year, especially in what is still a tough black and blue division.
Yes.
In the NFC North.
Because even though you have to play the Packers and the Vikings, and you think, well, we got Detroit. Yeah, but Detroit has just as much talent as Chicago, but I'd rather have Matthew Stafford. And they're 6-1 to win the division, 33-66. I'm telling you right now, I like Detroit better than Chicago. I'm not saying I would put money on Detroit, of course, because they can't win I don't even remember the last time they won a playoff game, let alone I'm going to put money on them to get to the Super Bowl. But I don't know. I have a good feeling about Detroit this year. I really like what they've done with their additions in the offseason. Okudah was a huge pickup in the draft. You bring in Desmond Trufant, so hopefully he's going to help as well. Collins is such a big addition to their front seven on defense. He's going to be a big-time leader at that linebacker one of those linebacker spots that has been killing him. And linebackers have done nothing for Detroit for years. So Collins is a huge addition. They brought in a few other former Patriots, of course, with Matt Patricia as the head coach. But look, Matthew Stafford, when he was healthy early on in the season last year, Detroit was playing some good football. They should have beaten Kansas City in that game early in the season. And then it should have definitely beat the Packers in that game in Green Bay. And then all of a sudden, Stafford gets hurt, the rest of the team gets hurt, and they can't win a football game. So if they can stay healthy, especially Matthew Stafford, with the players that I like that they've added this year, I actually think Detroit is going to be battling for a playoff spot late in the season.
I do too. In fact, Matthew Stafford, he was just beat up with injuries, and if he comes back healthy, he could arguably be the best quarterback in this division.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's got the arm. There's no question about that. And if you take a look, he was out of that lineup much of the year last football season here. Half of their 12 losses last year were by a touchdown or less.
And then there were a bunch of games without Stafford.
Without Stafford,
yeah.
Right. So you slice that in half, and that suddenly makes them a competitive football team, especially within the division here. I'm a big Matthew Stafford fan. The thing that jumps out to me, though, is under Matt Patricia, this football team is really, really terrible when they lose the turnovers. When they lose the turnovers of their opponent, they're 0-11-1 straight up and 1-11 to the spread. So they have to protect the football, do a much, much better job of doing that. But when you have a healthy Matthew Stafford there to do it, and they're coming off of what I thought was a real solid draft, Jonah Jackson, the guard from Ohio State, this kid's a stud. He's a terrific pass protector, and if he can keep Matthew Stafford up on his feet and out of harm's way, I think there could be some big improvement by Detroit this year. I think Detroit will be the most improved team in this division this year.
Yeah, they added a few other players, skill position players offensively. Allison will help the depth of receiver, but they're fine with Jones, Galladay, and Amendola as their starters. You do expect them. You do expect T.J. Hawkinson to take that next step in year two. And then they had DeAndre Swift because Kerryon Johnson, you can't count on him to stay healthy. So now you have DeAndre Swift, and even Bo Scarborough played well for them last year. They drafted Jason Huntley, Ty Johnson last year. So since Quinn has taken over, they've tried to change the football with Detroit. They want to be more of a power football team, take the pressure off of Matthew Stafford, run the football, play better defense. That's why Patricia's the head coach. And I'm thinking the thing that really hurt them last year too, you're talking about the turnovers. Patricia and the secondary, they played man defense more than any defense in the NFL last year, and they didn't have the talent for it.
No, they didn't.
No, and it killed them, and they couldn't get turnovers. And so that's really going to be. That's why I said Okudah is such a big addition, and Trufant. They added a few other players back there as well. And by the way, we got Duron Harmon in a trade with the Patriots. But I also like the fact that they went out and they added 4 really good special teamers. So they're trying to be a complete football team. They have a solid kicker in Matt Prater. I think this is health-wise. That's the key. Look, I'm still not putting any money on them. If anything, if I was going to put money on Detroit, I'd rather put money on them to win the division at 6-1, but I would not touch anything else other than that.
Well, I think, like I say, I think they will be a surprise within the division. I think they'll be a team that might even finish in second place in the division. If they do just that, you never know where the chips may fall. Remember this, last year, Matthew Stafford, when he was not in the lineup, Detroit was 0-8.
Yeah.
With him, they were 3-4-1. They were a competitive football team, nearly 500. So he's the difference maker, and I think that'll end up being the case for Detroit this football season.
All right. So once again, as we close here, and we'll be updating our picks the last week before the season begins. But as of right now, I would probably say, Packers and Vikings. I'm intrigued by the numbers that they both have, and as far as championship, maybe not sure Super Bowl, but if Detroit 6-1 to win the division, I don't really like taking division teams too much. But if this is something we'll have to take a look at in another month or so when we take a look at our final picks, maybe Detroit's one of those teams that I would, if I'm going to take a team to win a division and I'm going to risk money, maybe the Lions will be one of those teams that I go with.
Well, if you, in doing your work, you're looking for teams to regress, for your team to move forward. If that's the case, there is, I think, definitely regression with the Chicago Bears, who never were going to be much of a factor. So who will regress the most between Green Bay and Minnesota for Detroit to take their place? Likely Green Bay. They're not going to smell 14 wins this football season here. And you've also got Zach Taylor in his second year where they've got game film on him and his tendencies. So it's going to be really, really difficult, I think, for Green Bay to repeat in this division here this year. I see Minnesota winning the division, and I see Detroit being the surprise second-place team.
Oh, okay, good. We're on the same page with the Lions. And by the way, you met Matt LaFleur.
Matt LaFleur, yes. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Hey, they're all these young coaches that are being thrown around nowadays. It's kind of hard to, especially when they haven't really done anything yet. Yeah, and that's funny that it is. The Green Bay is one of those teams that if you ask anybody outside Green Bay, hey, do you remember how many wins the Packers had last year? I bet you 90% of the fans out there would be shocked to hear that they won 13 games last year.
Yeah, I mean, they'll be stunned to do just that. And correct me if I'm wrong, it was 14 with the playoff wins. So,
yeah.
Right. So, all in all, it was really, really a very satisfying year for LaFleur as a rookie head coach.
Yeah, absolutely.
But again, like I say,
smoke and mirrors.
Smoke and mirrors and adjustments. The combination of the two, I think, ends up sending Green Bay back south this year.
All right, sounds good, Mark. Next week it is the AFC North, and then that'll be our halfway point, won't it?
Yeah, and that's my hometown Cleveland Browns, so I'll have a lot to say about them and what their chances are this football season.
Hey, you never know, right? Maybe next year's the year. Who knows?
I've been hearing that my whole life.
I was watching one of those all-time classic games. I was watching the Jets and the Browns. Remember that playoff game, that marathon at the lake, whatever the hell they called it, in the mid-'80s when Mosley missed like five game-winning field goals and it finally hit one in double overtime. The Jets blew the game. They had 2-score lead with like 4 or 5 minutes to go in a game, and typical Jet fashion, they blew that one and coasted. That was the week before the drive game. That was the game the Browns stole from the Jets, and then the next week Denver stole the game from the Browns.
John Elway on the drive, exactly.
Yeah,
right.
But just watching those classic games, even though that was a crappy stadium, it's just, it just brings back memories. I just love watching those games because, especially just the atmosphere, and Cleveland's a great place, great football town. You just want to bring that football playoff atmosphere back to Cleveland.
Well, as a kid growing up in Cleveland, Greg, I will tell you this. I sold scorecards at that stadium, okay? And the reason I sold scorecards was because I would make a little bit of money and I would get to watch the second half of the game free of charge. So it was a big incentive for me to do just that. And the truth is every Cleveland football fan, they're not immersed with the stadium and the look and the feel and the aesthetics and everything.
Yeah.
They could have played in a mud bowl. They would not have cared as long as they had football there.
Yes.
But it was nice to see that stadium eventually be taken down and a new one put up. So, all I can say, like Archie Bunker, those were the days.
Yeah, and that's the way I feel Jet fans feel about Shea Stadium.
Yep, same thing.
They just don't feel at home with that New Jersey stadium they play in, sharing with the Giants. Doesn't feel like they used to have a home field advantage with Shea Stadium. They haven't had a home field advantage since. So
it's going to be the same thing for the two Los Angeles teams when they make it to that new Sci-Fi Field, that stadium. Which one will become the home team? I don't think the Chargers are ever going to be really accepted as being a Los Angeles football team. So they look like they'll be the guy that comes up with the short end of the stick.
And it's also a shame that it's going to take a while before fans can actually watch the Las Vegas game. I mean, just imagine if you can't go to watch that Vegas game, the first game or two, or you can't watch that first game or two with the Tampa Bay Bucks with Tom Brady.
Well, it's surreal, is what it really is, and just take it to the Vegas Knights hockey team. In their first expansion year, they made it to the finals.
That was crazy.
Stanley Cup playoffs, and it was all basically largely fan supported.
Yeah.
You're not going to have that with the Raiders this football season here. So, when we get to them, we'll be talking all about that situation as well.
All right. Sounds good, Mark. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you next week.
Hey, my pleasure as always, Greg. Be well, stay safe. I'll catch you next week.